The blood-red sun dipped below the jagged horizon as Eliza Novak pressed her tear-stained face against the cool glass of her bedroom window, watching her father and brothers drag her grandmother's dowry chest across the yard toward the waiting merchant's wagon. The chest had been promised to her since she was a child, the last connection to a grandmother she'd barely known, and the only hope she had of starting a new life away from her family's crumbling homestead outside Copper Creek, Arizona Territory, 1885. Eliza's delicate fingers curled into fists as her father gestured animatedly to the merchant, pointing at the ornately carved wooden chest with its brass fittings and tiny mother-of-pearl inlays. The drought had hit their small ranch hard, and with each passing week, the Novak family edged closer to destitution. The chest was one of the last valuable items they possessed, and her father had decided its fate without consulting her. "You cannot just take what is mine," Eliza whispered, her breath fogging the window. At 20 years old, she'd spent her life being the dutiful daughter, cooking, cleaning, and tending to her 3 younger brothers after her mother's death from fever 5 years ago. The dowry chest represented her only chance at independence, the only thing her family couldn't take from her. Until today, gathering her courage, Eliza swept down the narrow staircase, her simple cotton dress swishing around her ankles. Her long auburn hair, hastily pinned up that morning, had begun to come loose, framing her face in soft tendrils as she burst through the front door. "Father," she called, striding across the dusty yard. "That chest was promised to me. Grandmother left it for my dowry." Harold Novak turned slowly, his weathered face a mask of resignation and annoyance. At 45, years of harsh sun and harder work had carved deep lines around his eyes and mouth. He sighed heavily, removing his hat to wipe sweat from his brow. "Eliza, you know our situation. Mr. Peterson here has offered $20 for the chest, $20 that will feed this family for weeks. But it's mine," she insisted, her voice cracking. "Mother promised." "Your mother isn't here," he snapped, then immediately softened. "I'm sorry, Eliza. But promises don't put food on the table." The merchant, a portly man with small, calculating eyes, cleared his throat. "If it helps, miss, I plan to display it in my shop in town. It's quite a fine piece, won't be hidden away in some attic." Eliza ignored him, keeping her gaze fixed on her father. "And what of my future? That chest is all I have." Her youngest brother, Thomas, only 12, looked up with wide, innocent eyes. "But Eliza, we need to eat." She felt her resolve weakening at the boy's plea. Her other brothers, William and Joseph, 16 and 14 respectively, had the decency to look uncomfortable, shuffling their feet in the dust. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew everyone's attention to the road, where a lone rider approached through the golden haze of sunset. He rode with the easy confidence of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle, sitting tall on a magnificent chestnut stallion. As he drew closer, Eliza could make out his features, a strong jaw peppered with stubble, sun-bronzed skin, and eyes the color of a summer storm. He wasn't particularly handsome in the conventional sense, but there was something magnetic about him, an air of quiet strength that commanded attention. "Evening, folks," he called, tipping his wide-brimmed hat as he reined in his horse. "Evening," Harold replied cautiously. Strangers were not uncommon in these parts, but not always welcome. "Name's Lucas James," the rider offered, dismounting with fluid grace. "I'm looking for the Novak place. Would that be here?" "You found it," Harold said, stepping forward with his hand extended. "I'm Harold Novak. These are my sons and my daughter Eliza." Lucas nodded politely to each of them, his gaze lingering briefly on Eliza. When their eyes met, she felt a strange flutter in her chest, but quickly looked away, embarrassed by her disheveled appearance and tear-stained cheeks. "What brings you to our ranch, Mr. James?" Harold asked. "I'm riding for the double-bar outfit north of here. Your neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, mentioned you might have some horses for sale. Our remuda took a hit during the spring stampede." Harold's expression brightened slightly. "We do have a few good horses left, though not many. Would you care to see them?" "I would indeed," Lucas replied, then gestured toward the merchant and the chest, "though I don't want to interrupt your business." The merchant, eager to conclude the transaction, quickly interjected, "We were just finishing up here." $20 for the chest, Mr. Novak. Eliza felt fresh tears threatening. Father, please, what's this about? Lucas asked, his gaze falling on the dowry chest. Harold cleared his throat uncomfortably. Just selling some furniture we don't need anymore. Times are hard. It's my dowry chest, Eliza blurted out, ignoring her father's warning glare. It belonged to my grandmother, and my mother promised it would be mine when I married. Now they're selling it without my consent. Lucas studied the chest thoughtfully, then looked back at Eliza. A flicker of understanding passed across his features, as though he could read the desperation in her eyes. A dowry chest, you say? He walked over, admiring the craftsmanship. European, if I'm not mistaken. Austrian, perhaps? Hungarian, Eliza corrected, surprised. My grandmother brought it from the old country. Lucas nodded appreciatively. Fine workmanship. He turned to Harold and the merchant. If you don't mind my saying, $20 seems a poor price for such a piece. The merchant bristled. It's a fair price for these parts. Perhaps, Lucas conceded, but a lady's dowry is more than just the chest and what's inside it. He glanced at Eliza, his eyes warm. Her dowry is her smile, her spirit, her heart, things no amount of money can buy. Eliza felt her cheeks warm under his gaze, a strange flutter stirring in her chest. Harold shifted uncomfortably. That's all very poetic, Mr. James, but poetry doesn't feed my boys. No, but good horseflesh might, Lucas replied evenly. I came prepared to pay a fair price for quality stock. If your horses are as good as Mrs. Wilson suggested, perhaps we can work out an arrangement that benefits everyone. He paused meaningfully. Including your daughter. Hope bloomed in Eliza's heart as she watched her father consider the cowboy's words. Lucas James had appeared from nowhere like some guardian angel and now stood between her and the loss of her last treasure. But could he really help, or was he just delaying the inevitable? Harold looked skeptical but nodded slowly. Let's discuss it while we look at the horses. As the men started toward the corral, Lucas turned back to Eliza. Miss Novak, perhaps you'd like to join us. It seems you have a stake in this matter. Eliza hesitated only briefly before falling into step beside him, feeling her father's disapproving gaze but choosing to ignore it. As they walked, Lucas leaned slightly closer to her. That chest means a great deal to you, he observed quietly. It's all I have left of my mother and grandmother, she replied, keeping her voice low. And my only hope for a future of my own. Lucas nodded thoughtfully. I understand the value of legacy, Miss Novak, and I believe a promise made should be a promise kept. For the first time that day, Eliza allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. There was something about Lucas James, a steadiness, a reliability that made her believe he might actually help her. But why would a stranger care about her dowry chest? What was his true purpose at the Novak ranch? As they approached the corral, the setting sun cast long shadows across the hard-packed earth, and the horses within nickered softly in greeting. Among them was Eliza's own mare, a dappled gray named Willow, the last gift from her mother before she died. The thought that Willow might be sold as well had kept Eliza awake many nights. Harold unlatched the gate and stepped inside, gesturing for Lucas to follow. We've got 7 head left, not as many as before the drought, but they're sound animals. Lucas entered the corral and moved among the horses with the ease of a man who understood them. He spoke softly, ran his hands down legs, checked teeth, and observed each animal's movement with a critical eye. All the while, Eliza stood at the fence, watching him work with growing admiration. You've kept them in fine condition despite the hard times, Lucas commented, patting the neck of a sturdy bay gelding. That speaks well of your husbandry, Mr. Novak. Harold nodded in acknowledgement of the compliment. We do what we can. The double bar could use at least 4 of these animals, Lucas said after completing his assessment. I'm authorized to offer $30 a head. Eliza's breath caught. $120 would be a substantial sum for her family, enough to see them through the worst of their financial troubles without selling her chest. Harold's eyes widened slightly. That's a generous offer, Mr. James. It's a fair one, Lucas corrected. These are good horses, well-trained and sound, worth every penny. He glanced at Eliza, then back at her father. Of course, I would expect the young lady's property to remain with her as part of our agreement. The merchant, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward with an aggrieved expression. "Now see here, we already had a deal, we hadn't shaken on it yet." "Peterson," Harold interrupted, eyeing the substantial profit that Lucas was offering. "No offense, but Mr. James's proposal is considerably more beneficial to my family." Peterson's face reddened. "This is highly irregular. I came all this way, and I apologize for your trouble," Harold said firmly. "But a father must do what's best for his family." The merchant stormed off to his wagon, muttering under his breath about unreliable country folk. As the sound of his departing wagon faded, Harold turned to Lucas with a mixture of relief and curiosity. "Why would you care about my daughter's chest, Mr. James? You don't know us." Lucas shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Let's just say I respect family traditions. My own mother had a similar chest brought from Tennessee when she was a bride. Some things shouldn't have a price tag." Eliza stared at him, trying to reconcile this surprising glimpse of sentimentality with the capable, practical cowboy who had so thoroughly assessed their horses. Who exactly was Lucas James? As if reading her thoughts, Lucas smiled slightly, the corner of his mouth lifting in a way that transformed his serious face. "Besides, Miss Novak's distress was plain to see. I find I can't abide seeing a lady in tears, especially over something that rightfully belongs to her." Harold looked between them, something like understanding dawning in his eyes. "Well then," he said, extending his hand to Lucas, "we have a deal, Mr. James. 4 horses for $120 and my daughter keeps her chest." As they shook hands, Eliza felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She would keep her grandmother's chest after all. But as she watched Lucas and her father discuss the details of transferring the horses, a new concern took root in her mind. Once the transaction was complete, Lucas James would ride away, back to the Double Bar Ranch, and she would likely never see him again. The thought brought an unexpected pang of disappointment. That evening, Harold invited Lucas to stay for supper, an offer the cowboy graciously accepted. Eliza hurried to the kitchen to prepare the best meal she could from their limited stores. She found herself taking extra care with her appearance, pinning her hair more securely and changing into her Sunday dress before serving the food. The simple meal of beans, cornbread, and the last of their preserved venison seemed to please Lucas, who complimented her cooking with genuine appreciation. As they ate, he shared stories of his life on various ranches across the territory, painting vivid pictures of the places he'd seen and people he'd met. "How long have you been with the Double Bar?" William asked, clearly fascinated by their guest. "Just over a year," Lucas replied. "Before that, I rode for outfits in Colorado and Texas, been on my own since I was 16. "No family?" Harold inquired. A shadow passed over Lucas's face. "Lost my parents to cholera when I was young. My uncle raised me until I was old enough to make my own way." Eliza felt a surge of sympathy. "That must have been difficult." Lucas met her gaze across the table, his eyes reflecting old pain. "It was, but it taught me to value what matters, people over possessions, promises over profit." He smiled slightly. "Though I won't claim I've always lived by those principles. I've made my share of mistakes." There was a story there, Eliza thought, something deeper that had shaped this man into who he was now. But before she could pursue the thought, her father changed the subject. "Will you be heading back to the Double Bar tomorrow?" Lucas nodded. "I'll need to get these horses there safely. My foreman is expecting me back within the week." "It's a long ride," Harold observed. "You're welcome to stay another night if you need rest." "That's kind of you, but I should get an early start." Lucas paused, then added, "Though I would appreciate the chance to water my horse and have a cup of coffee before I leave in the morning." "Of course," Harold agreed. "Eliza always has coffee ready at dawn." After supper, while her brothers cleared the table, Eliza stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The night was cool, stars sprinkled across the vast Arizona sky like diamond dust. She found herself drawn to her grandmother's chest, still sitting near the front porch where the merchant had left it. Running her hands over the smooth wood, she silently thanked whatever twist of fate had brought Lucas James to their door that day. It truly is beautiful craftsmanship. She turned to find Lucas standing a few feet away, his tall figure silhouetted against the lamplight spilling from the house. "I never properly thanked you," Eliza said softly. "What you did today. I don't even know how to express my gratitude." Lucas stepped closer, and in the pale moonlight, she could see his expression thoughtful, perhaps a bit wistful. "No thanks needed, Miss Novak. It was the right thing to do. Still, most men wouldn't have interfered in another family's business." "Perhaps I'm not most men," he replied, a hint of humor in his voice. "No," she agreed quietly, "I don't believe you are." A comfortable silence fell between them as they both looked up at the star-filled sky. Eliza found herself wishing the moment could stretch on, that dawn wouldn't come so quickly to take this intriguing man away from her life. "May I ask what's inside?" Lucas inquired, nodding toward the chest. "If it's not too personal a question." Eliza hesitated only briefly. "I'm not entirely sure. My mother always said I should only open it when I was ready to start my own household. After she died, I couldn't bring myself to look. It felt like opening it without her would make her death final somehow." Lucas nodded in understanding. "Some wounds take longer to heal than others. But perhaps it's time," she said, surprising herself with the decision. Would you stay while I open it?" The request seemed forward even to her own ears, but Lucas didn't appear scandalized. Instead, he nodded solemnly. "I'd be honored." Together, they carried the chest onto the porch where the lamplight from inside illuminated the intricate carvings. Eliza knelt before it, her fingers trembling slightly as she released the brass clasp and lifted the heavy lid. The scent of cedar and lavender wafted up her mother's favorite fragrance. Inside, carefully packed, were linens hand-embroidered with delicate flowers, a small collection of silver tableware wrapped in soft cloth, several leather-bound books in Hungarian that had belonged to her grandmother, and a beautiful handmade quilt in a traditional pattern of blues and creams. Beneath these treasures was a smaller wooden box. Eliza opened it to find a simple gold locket and a folded letter addressed to her in her mother's handwriting. Tears sprang to her eyes as she carefully unfolded the paper. "My dearest Eliza," she read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "If you are reading this, then the time has come for you to make your own path in life. Inside this locket is a portrait of your grandmother as a young woman and a lock of my hair. Carry us with you wherever you go, knowing that our love travels with you always." The contents of this chest are modest, but they represent our family's legacy of strength, skill, and love. Your true dowry, my darling girl, is your kind heart, your clever mind, and your beautiful spirit. These are the gifts that will bring you true happiness. All my love, Mother. Tears flowed freely down Eliza's cheeks now. Lucas stood silently nearby, offering her the privacy of her grief while still providing his supportive presence. When she finally looked up at him, wiping her tears away with the back of her hand, he offered her a handkerchief. "She sounds like she was a remarkable woman," he said gently. "She was," Eliza confirmed, carefully folding the letter and placing it back in the box. "And she was right. These things are precious to me, but they're just things. The real value is in what they represent." "Just as I said," Lucas replied with a soft smile. "Your dowry is your smile, your spirit, your heart." Their eyes met in the lamplight, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. For a moment, Eliza allowed herself to imagine what it might be like if Lucas James didn't have to leave in the morning, if he could stay, and they could explore this unexpected connection. But reality intruded as her father called from inside, reminding them of the late hour and the early start Lucas had planned. The moment broke, and Lucas stepped back respectfully. "I should get some rest," he said. "Dawn comes early." Eliza nodded, closing the chest carefully. "Of course." "Thank you for sharing this moment with me, Mr. James." "Lucas," he corrected gently. "After witnessing something so personal, I think we can dispense with formalities, Miss Novak." "Eliza," she replied with a small smile. "Good night, Lucas." "Good night, Eliza," he answered, his voice warm. "Sleep well." As she lay in her narrow bed that night, Eliza found herself replaying every moment of their conversation, every glance exchanged. Tomorrow he would leave, and life would return to its usual rhythm. Yet something had changed within her. The opening of her mother's chest had unlocked something in her heart, as well a new determination to seek her own happiness, whatever form it might take. Dawn arrived with the soft golden light that made the Arizona desert so breathtakingly beautiful. Eliza had been awake for hours, preparing a hearty breakfast for the family and their guest, and brewing the promised coffee. She had taken special care with her appearance, choosing her best everyday dress and arranging her hair in a simple but flattering style. When Lucas entered the kitchen, their eyes met briefly, and the connection from the previous evening remained, undiminished by sleep or daylight. They exchanged quiet good mornings as she handed him a steaming cup of coffee. "You're up early," he observed, taking a grateful sip. "There's always work to be done," she replied, turning back to the stove where bacon sizzled. "And I wanted to make sure you had a proper meal before your journey. I appreciate that. It's been a long time since I've had home cooking this good." Harold and the boys soon joined them, and breakfast passed pleasantly with talk of ranch matters and the latest news from town. All too soon, it was time for Lucas to depart. Harold counted out the agreed-upon payment, and Lucas carefully stowed the money in his saddlebags. "I'll have one of my men bring your receipt next time someone comes to town," Lucas promised. "No rush," Harold assured him. "Your word is good enough." As Lucas prepared to lead the purchased horses away, Eliza stepped forward, holding a small package wrapped in cloth. "Some cornbread and jerky for your journey," she explained, handing it to him. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, sending a jolt of awareness through her. Lucas seemed to feel it too, his eyes darkening slightly as he carefully tucked the package into his saddlebag. "Thank you, Eliza," he said, his voice low and sincere, "for everything. Will you?" She hesitated, then gathered her courage. "Will you be coming back this way anytime soon?" Lucas studied her face for a moment before answering. "The Double Bar does business in Copper Creek regularly. I imagine I'll be through these parts again before long." Hope bloomed in her chest. "Perhaps you'll stop by when you do." "I'd like that very much," he replied, his smile reaching his eyes. With final farewells exchanged, Lucas mounted his chestnut stallion and set off, leading the 4 horses he'd purchased. Eliza watched until he disappeared from sight, a mixture of emotions swirling within her: gratitude, admiration, and something new and fragile that she wasn't quite ready to name. "He seems a good man," her father commented, standing beside her. Eliza nodded, not trusting her voice just then. "A bit older than you," Harold continued thoughtfully, "but not too much. Maybe 30, 28, she corrected, then blushed when her father raised an eyebrow at her. "He mentioned it at dinner." Harold smiled knowingly but said nothing more, leaving Eliza to her thoughts as she turned back to her daily chores. The weeks that followed settled into a familiar pattern, but Eliza's thoughts often drifted to Lucas James. Would he really return, or had those words been merely politeness? She tried to focus on her responsibilities, but each passing day without word from him diminished her hope a little more. Nearly a month after Lucas's departure, William came rushing into the house, excitement evident on his young face. "Rider coming. Looks like that cowboy Lucas." Eliza's heart leapt, and she hurried to the mirror, checking her appearance before chiding herself for such vanity. Still, she couldn't help smoothing her hair and pinching color into her cheeks before stepping onto the porch. Indeed, it was Lucas approaching on his chestnut stallion, looking trail-worn but smiling broadly when he caught sight of her. He dismounted with the same fluid grace she remembered, removing his hat as he approached the house. "Miss Novak," he greeted her, his voice warming her from within. "I hope I find you well." "Very well, thank you," she replied, striving for composure despite the quickening of her pulse. "And yourself? Better for seeing a friendly face," he said, his gray eyes twinkling. "I've been on the trail for 3 days." Harold emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "Mr. James, good to see you again. What brings you back to our neck of the woods?" "Business in town," Lucas explained, shaking Harold's hand. "And I wanted to check how things were faring with you folks. Those horses working out for the Double Bar." "Pleased to hear it," Harold replied when Lucas confirmed they were. "You'll stay for supper, of course." Eliza was just about to start cooking. Lucas glanced at Eliza as if seeking her approval. "If it's no trouble, No trouble at all, she assured him, secretly delighted by this turn of events. We have plenty. As she prepared the evening meal, Eliza could hear Lucas and her father talking outside, their voices occasionally punctuated by laughter. It sounded as though they were getting along well, which pleased her enormously. Supper that evening was a lively affair, with Lucas sharing tales of his recent work breaking horses for the double bar, and the boys eagerly asking questions about life on a large ranch. Eliza spoke little, content to observe and listen, noting how naturally Lucas fit into their family dynamic. After the meal, Harold suggested Lucas might like to see how the new irrigation system they'd installed was working. As the two men walked toward the fields, William nudged Eliza. "Pa likes him," her brother observed. "He seems a good man," Eliza replied noncommittally, though her heart raced at her brother's implications. "He keeps looking at you when you're not watching," Thomas added with a grin. "Like Joseph looks at Mary Sanders in town." "Hush," she scolded, but couldn't suppress a smile. Had Lucas really been watching her? Later, as twilight settled over the ranch, Eliza found herself alone with Lucas on the porch, much as they had been on his previous visit. The air between them seemed charged with unspoken thoughts and possibilities. "I brought something for you," Lucas said after a comfortable silence. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small carved wooden horse, exquisitely detailed despite its size. "It's not much, but I thought you might like it." Eliza accepted the carving, turning it over in her hands, touched by the gesture. "Did you make this?" Lucas nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. "Whittling passes the time during long watches. I'm not particularly skilled, but it's beautiful," she interrupted sincerely. "Truly, thank you." Their fingers brushed again as she held the carving, and neither pulled away immediately. Eliza felt her breath catch at the contact, at the warmth of his skin against hers. "I've thought about you," Lucas admitted quietly. "More than I probably should, given our brief acquaintance." Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. "I've thought of you too." His expression softened, and he seemed about to say more when Harold's voice called from inside, breaking the moment once again. Lucas stayed 2 nights this time, helping with various ranch tasks during the day and spending evenings in conversation with the family. With each passing hour, Eliza felt herself drawn more deeply to this quiet, thoughtful man who had saved her grandmother's chest, and now seemed to be gently claiming a place in her heart as well. On the morning of his departure, Lucas sought her out as she was gathering eggs from the chicken coop. "I have to return to the double bar," he said without preamble, "but I'd like your permission to write to you, Eliza." Joy surged through her. "I would like that very much. And perhaps when my duties allow, I might call on you properly, with your father's permission, of course." "I believe he would welcome it," she replied, trying to contain her happiness. "As would I." Something in her expression must have emboldened him, for Lucas stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "May I?" he began, then faltered, glancing toward the house. Understanding his intention, Eliza nodded slightly, her heart pounding as Lucas leaned down and pressed a gentle, brief kiss to her cheek. It was a chaste gesture, entirely proper, yet it sent warmth flooding through her entire being. "Until next time, Eliza Novak," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "Until next time, Lucas James," she replied softly, true to his word. Lucas's first letter arrived barely a week later, delivered by a ranch hand passing through Copper Creek. Eliza read it privately in her room, savoring each carefully written word. He wrote of his daily life at the double bar, his hopes for the future, and most touchingly, how thoughts of her brightened even his most difficult days. She replied the very same day, pouring her heart onto the pages in a way she never could have done in person. Thus began a correspondence that sustained them both through the weeks they spent apart. Lucas returned to the Novak ranch twice more over the next 2 months, each visit longer than the last. With Harold's explicit permission, he began officially courting Eliza, taking her for rides across the countryside and sharing long conversations about their dreams and experiences. During one such ride, they stopped to rest in the shade of a towering cottonwood tree beside a small creek. Seated on a fallen log, Eliza gathered her courage to ask a question that had been on her mind. "Lucas, what made you speak up that day about my chest?" You could have simply bought the horses and gone on your way." Lucas was quiet for a moment, absently stroking his horse's neck. "My mother lost everything when my father died," he finally said, "including items that had been in her family for generations. I was too young to stop it, but I remember her grief, not for the things themselves, but for what they represented." He met Eliza's gaze. "When I saw your face that day, I recognized that same look. I couldn't stand by and watch history repeat itself." Eliza's heart swelled with affection for this man who understood loss so intimately and sought to prevent it in others. Impulsively, she reached for his hand, twining their fingers together. "Thank you for sharing that with me," she said softly. Lucas's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "There's something about you, Eliza Novak, that makes me want to share everything." Their eyes held, and in that moment, Eliza knew with certainty that she was falling in love with Lucas James. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. As summer turned to autumn, their relationship deepened. Lucas spoke more openly of his past, including some darker chapters, involving a brief period riding with a rough crowd after his uncle's death. He'd never broken the law, he assured her, but he'd strayed close to that line before finding his way back to honest work. "I wasn't always the man you see before you," he admitted during one of his visits, as they walked along the edge of the Novak property. "It took years to figure out what kind of man I wanted to be." "And what kind is that?" Eliza asked, genuinely curious. Lucas stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "The kind who keeps his word, who works honestly for what he has, who treats others with respect." He paused, his gaze intensifying. "The kind worthy of someone like you." The sincerity in his voice moved her deeply. "You are that man, Lucas. I see it every day in your actions." Their relationship had progressed to the point where brief, tender kisses were exchanged during moments of privacy, each one strengthening the bond between them. But physical affection was secondary to the deep, emotional connection they had forged through their letters and conversations. As November arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and the promise of winter, Lucas arrived for another visit, this time staying for a full week to help the Novak family prepare their ranch for the coming cold. The extra hands were welcome, as were the supplies he brought from town gifts. He insisted, not charity. On his final evening, after supper had been cleared away and the boys had retired for the night, Lucas asked Harold for a private word. Eliza watched them step outside, her heart hammering with anticipation. She knew what Lucas intended to discuss with her father, for he had hinted at it in his most recent letter. When they returned nearly half an hour later, her father's eyes were suspiciously bright, and Lucas looked both nervous and elated. Harold squeezed his daughter's shoulder as he passed her, heading to his own room with a meaningful glance between her and Lucas. "Would you walk with me, Eliza?" Lucas asked softly. "Just to the porch. It's a beautiful night." Indeed it was. Stars glittered overhead in a clear sky, and a nearly full moon bathed the landscape in silver light. Lucas led her to the edge of the porch, where they stood side by side, looking out at the land that had shaped them both in different ways. "I spoke with your father," Lucas began, his voice steadier than she expected. "I gathered as much," she replied, trying to keep her own voice even despite the hope bursting in her chest. Lucas turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. In the moonlight, his features were softly illuminated, his eyes reflecting the depth of emotion he clearly felt. "Eliza Novak, when I rode onto your family's land that day in June, I had no idea my life was about to change forever. I came looking for horses and found something infinitely more precious." He squeezed her hands gently. "I found you." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes, but they were tears of happiness. "Lucas, let me finish, please," he said gently. "I know our courtship has been unusual, with more time spent apart than together. But in those letters, in those precious days we've shared, I've come to know your heart, your mind, your spirit, and I love all that I've found there." With trembling fingers, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold band. "This was my mother's," he explained. "The one thing I managed to keep when everything else was sold. I've carried it with me all these years, waiting for the right woman to wear it." Eliza's breath caught as Lucas lowered himself to one knee before her, still holding her left hand in his. "Eliza Novak, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? I can't offer you wealth or luxury, but I promise to cherish you every day of our lives, to respect your mind and heart as much as your beauty, to build a life of love and partnership together." Joy unlike anything she had ever known flooded through Eliza. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Lucas James, I will marry you." The smile that illuminated his face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Rising to his feet, Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as though it had been made for her all along. Then he drew her into his arms and kissed her with a tenderness that spoke volumes about the man he was and the husband he would be. When they finally parted, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Your father has given his blessing," he murmured, "and he suggested a Christmas wedding if that suits you." "Christmas," Eliza repeated, her mind whirling with plans and possibilities, just 6 weeks away. "Yes, that would be perfect." They stood together in the moonlight, newly engaged, hearts full of plans for their shared future. The dowry chest that had brought them together would travel with them to their new home, carrying not just Eliza's family treasures but the beginning of their own family legacy. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of preparations. Lucas returned to the double bar to give notice and make arrangements for their future. He had saved enough over the years to purchase a small ranch of his own, he explained in his letters, not grand, but sufficient for a good start, with room to grow. Located just 15 miles from the Novak property, it would allow Eliza to visit her family regularly. Meanwhile, Eliza threw herself into wedding preparations. She altered her mother's wedding dress, a simple but elegant gown of ivory satin that had been carefully preserved in the dowry chest. She and her neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, prepared food for the modest celebration, and the local pastor agreed to perform the ceremony at the Novak home on Christmas Eve. 2 days before the wedding, Lucas arrived with a wagon containing his belongings and a special surprise for his bride, a handcrafted rocking chair he had commissioned from a skilled carpenter in Copper Creek. "For quiet evenings at home," he explained as the chair was carried into the Novak house. "And perhaps, someday, for rocking our children to sleep." Eliza blushed at the implication, but couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her at the thought of building a family with this man who had so thoroughly captured her heart. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, a light dusting of rare desert snow making the landscape look magical. Inside the Novak home, pine boughs and red ribbons decorated the modest rooms, and candles glowed in every window. Neighbors from surrounding ranches arrived throughout the afternoon, bearing small gifts and dishes for the wedding supper. In her bedroom, Eliza prepared with trembling hands. Her mother's dress fit perfectly after her careful alterations, the ivory satin complementing her auburn hair, which she wore loose except for 2 small braids that met at the back of her head, adorned with a sprig of winter berries. A soft knock at the door revealed Mrs. Wilson, who had stepped in as a maternal figure for the occasion. "Oh, my dear," the older woman breathed, her eyes misting. "You look absolutely beautiful. Your mother would be so proud. Do you think so?" Eliza asked, suddenly wishing with all her heart that her mother could be there to see this day. "I know so," Mrs. Wilson assured her, adjusting a fold of the dress. "And that fine man waiting downstairs, he can hardly take his eyes off the staircase, waiting for you to appear." Eliza smiled at the image. "Is everything ready already? The pastor has arrived, the guests are seated, and your young man looks as nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs." Mrs. Wilson chuckled. "It's time, dear." Taking a deep breath, Eliza followed Mrs. Wilson out of the room and to the top of the stairs. The murmur of conversation below hushed as she appeared, and as she descended, her eyes found Lucas immediately. He stood beside the pastor near the fireplace, where a cheerful fire crackled. At the sight of her, his expression transformed from nervous anticipation to absolute wonder. He was handsome in his new dark suit, his usually unruly hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaven. But it was the love shining in his eyes that took Eliza's breath away. Harold met her at the bottom of the stairs, offering his arm with uncharacteristic formality. His eyes, so like her own, were bright with emotion as he whispered, "Your mother would be so happy today." Together, they walked the short distance to where Lucas waited. The ceremony itself was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged traditional vows, their voices steady and sincere as they promised to love, honor, and cherish one another for all their days. When Lucas slipped his mother's ring onto Eliza's finger, now accompanied by a simple wedding band, tears of joy slipped down her cheeks. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the pastor declared. "You may kiss your bride." Lucas cradled Eliza's face gently in his hands and kissed her with such tenderness that several of the female guests dabbed at their eyes. When they turned to face their gathered friends and family as Mr. and Mrs. James, the small house erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration that followed was joyous and intimate. A feast was laid out on tables brought in for the occasion, with Mrs. Wilson's famous apple pie as the centerpiece. Neighbors who had known Eliza since childhood offered heartfelt toasts to the couple's happiness, and even Eliza's brothers managed to express their genuine affection for their new brother-in-law, albeit with some teasing. Throughout the evening, Lucas rarely left Eliza's side, his hand often finding hers, his eyes frequently seeking her face as if to reassure himself that this wasn't a dream. When they had a moment alone, he leaned close to whisper in her ear, "Do you remember what I said that first day?" "About your dowry," Eliza nodded, smiling at the memory. "You said my dowry was my smile, my spirit, my heart." "I meant it then," he said softly, "and I mean it now. The chest and its contents are precious because they're part of your history, but you, Eliza James, you are the true treasure." The way he said her new name sent a thrill through her. She was Eliza James now, this man's wife, embarking on a new chapter of her life. As the evening progressed, the newlyweds bid farewell to their guests, who departed with final congratulations and well wishes. The Novak family, now including Lucas, spent a quiet hour by the fire before retiring for the night. Lucas would stay in the small guest room, and in the morning they would leave for their new home. Dawn broke crisp and clear on Christmas morning. After a festive breakfast and the exchange of modest gifts, it was time for the newlyweds to depart. The dowry chest, now containing not only Eliza's family treasures, but also wedding gifts and items for their new household, was carefully loaded onto their wagon. Farewells were emotional, especially between Eliza and her youngest brother Thomas, who clung to her with tears in his eyes. "You'll visit soon," he asked plaintively. "Very soon," she promised, kissing his forehead, "and you'll all come to see our new home once we're settled." Harold embraced his daughter tightly. "Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become," he murmured. "And I'm proud too. Lucas is a good man. He'll take care of you." "We'll take care of each other," Eliza corrected gently, making her father smile. With final embraces exchanged, Lucas helped Eliza onto the wagon seat beside him. With a flick of the reins, they set off, Eliza turning to wave until the Novak ranch disappeared from view around a bend in the road. "Are you all right?" Lucas asked softly, noticing her pensive expression. "Yes," she replied truthfully. "Sad to leave them, but excited for our future together." Lucas smiled, shifting the reins to one hand so he could take hers with the other. "I promise to make you happy, Eliza." "You already do," she assured him, leaning slightly against his solid presence beside her. Their journey took most of the day, with a brief stop for lunch by a small stream. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, Lucas pointed ahead. "There it is, our home." Eliza followed his gesture and saw a modest ranch house nestled against a backdrop of distant mountains. It wasn't large or grand, but even from a distance, she could see it had been well maintained, with a neat fence surrounding the immediate yard and several outbuildings arranged in a practical manner. As they drew closer, Lucas explained the property's features: 20 acres of decent grazing land, a small but reliable stream running along the western border, a barn that needed some repair but was fundamentally sound, and a chicken coop already inhabited by a dozen hens courtesy of a wedding gift from the double bar's foreman. "It's not much compared to some spreads," he said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice for the first time. "But with hard work, it's perfect," Eliza interrupted sincerely. "Absolutely perfect." Relief and happiness spread across Lucas's face as he guided the wagon up to the house. Before Eliza could move to climb down, he set the brake and came around to her side, reaching up to lift her easily in his strong arms. "Welcome home, Mrs. James," he said, carrying her across the threshold of their new house. Inside was simple but comfortable: a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area with a good stove, a bedroom visible through a doorway, and stairs leading to what Lucas explained was a small loft that could serve as additional sleeping space or storage. The furniture was basic but well crafted, much of it made by Lucas himself during the weeks leading up to the wedding. "I wanted to have everything ready for you," he explained, watching her reaction anxiously as she explored their new home. Eliza turned to him, her heart full of love for this man who had created this place for them with such care. "It's wonderful, Lucas, truly." The relief on his face was palpable. Setting down the small bag she had carried inside, he stepped closer, drawing her into his arms. "I've been dreaming of this moment since the day I asked you to be my wife, having you here in our home." His voice roughened with emotion. "It makes everything complete." As the last light of Christmas Day faded outside their windows, Lucas built a fire in the fireplace, while Eliza prepared a simple supper from provisions they had brought. They ate at the small table Lucas had crafted, talking of their plans for the ranch and savoring this first meal in their home. Later, as night fully claimed the desert, they stood together by the fire, husband and wife at last in every sense. Lucas's fingers gently traced the curve of her cheek, his eyes dark with a longing they no longer needed to restrain. "I love you, Eliza James," he whispered. "More than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," she replied, her heart full to bursting with the truth of those words. When he kissed her then, it was different from the kisses they had shared before, deeper, more passionate. A promise of the life they would build together, the family they would create, the love that would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. And as Lucas led her to their bedroom, Eliza knew with absolute certainty that the greatest treasure in her grandmother's dowry chest had not been the linens or silver or even her mother's cherished letter, but the legacy of love those women had passed down to her, a legacy she would continue with the good man who had seen her true worth from the very beginning. Spring came early to Arizona Territory in 1886, bringing new growth to the James Ranch. Under Lucas and Eliza's careful stewardship, the property was flourishing. They had added 5 more horses to their small herd, increased their chicken flock, and planted a vegetable garden that Eliza tended with pride. The ranch house had transformed as well, with Eliza's touch evident in every room. Curtains made from fabric in her dowry chest hung at the windows, and the handmade quilt brightened their bed. The dowry chest itself occupied a place of honor in their bedroom, now containing not only Eliza's family treasures, but also mementos of their growing life together, pressed flowers from their first spring, a sketch Lucas had made of their home, and letters they continued to exchange even while living under the same roof. Small notes of love and appreciation slipped into pockets or left on pillows. On a warm April morning, as sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, Eliza prepared breakfast with a secret smile playing about her lips. She had suspected for several weeks, but now she was certain she was carrying their first child. When Lucas came in from his morning chores, she had his coffee waiting and his favorite breakfast of flapjacks and bacon on the table. He kissed her cheek in greeting, as was their custom, but paused when he noticed the special gleam in her eyes. "What's that look for?" he asked, his own eyes crinkling with amusement. "Did I forget an anniversary?" "No," Eliza replied, taking his hand and guiding it to rest against her still flat stomach. "But perhaps we should start thinking about new anniversaries to celebrate." Lucas's expression transformed from confusion to dawning comprehension, then to pure, unadulterated joy. "Eliza, are you?" "Yes," she confirmed, her own happiness bubbling over. "We're going to have a baby, Lucas, around November, I think." With a whoop of delight, Lucas lifted her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen before setting her gently back on her feet, suddenly concerned. I didn't hurt you, did I? Or the baby? Eliza laughed, touched by his immediate protectiveness. We're fine, both of us. Lucas knelt before her, pressing a gentle kiss to her middle where their child grew. Hello in there, he whispered. Your mama and papa can't wait to meet you. Looking up at Eliza with eyes shining with unshed tears, he added, Thank you for this gift, my love, for making me a father. Thank you for making me so happy, she replied, running her fingers through his hair. For giving me everything I ever dreamed of and more. In the months that followed, they prepared joyfully for their child's arrival. Lucas spent evenings crafting a cradle from pine wood, carving small stars and moons into its sides. Eliza sewed tiny garments from soft fabric and prepared a corner of their bedroom to serve as a nursery. They shared their news with the Novak family during a Sunday visit in May, to great celebration. Harold seemed to age backwards with the news that he would be a grandfather, and Eliza's brothers competed for the title of favorite uncle before the baby was even born. As Eliza's body changed with the growing life inside her, Lucas's love and attentiveness only deepened. He took on more of the household chores, insisted she rest frequently, and spent hours talking to her rounded belly, telling their unborn child stories of his own childhood and dreams for their future. By late October, all was in readiness. The cradle stood beside their bed, filled with soft blankets. Tiny clothes were folded in a drawer, and Lucas had built a rocking chair similar to the one he had given Eliza as a wedding gift, but sized perfectly for nursing a baby. On a crisp November morning, just as the first light of dawn broke across the desert, Eliza felt the first pains that signaled their child's imminent arrival. Lucas rode for Mrs. Wilson, who had agreed to serve as midwife, then returned to his wife's side, his face a mixture of excitement and concern. Everything will be fine, Eliza assured him, squeezing his hand through a contraction. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. When Mrs. Wilson arrived, she shooed Lucas from the bedroom with firm instructions to boil water and prepare clean towels. He complied, though Eliza could hear him pacing outside the door, his anxiety evident in every heavy footfall. The labor progressed steadily throughout the day, Eliza drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. As twilight settled over the ranch, Mrs. Wilson finally announced that it was time to push. Lucas, Eliza called, her voice strained but determined. I want Lucas, despite Mrs. Wilson's initial protests about propriety, Lucas was summoned. He entered the room with reverent steps, his face pale with worry but his eyes filled with love as he took his place beside Eliza, supporting her as she brought their child into the world. A daughter, Mrs. Wilson announced triumphantly as newborn cries filled the room. A beautiful, healthy girl. Tears streamed down Lucas's face as he watched the midwife clean and wrap their daughter before placing her in Eliza's waiting arms. She's perfect, he whispered, gently touching the infant's tiny hand. Just like her mother. Exhausted but radiantly happy, Eliza gazed down at their child, a miniature miracle with Lucas's gray eyes and a dusting of what promised to be her own auburn hair. What shall we name her? They had discussed various options but had not settled on a final choice. Now, looking at their daughter's face, Lucas suggested softly, Margaret, after your mother, we could call her Maggie. Fresh tears welled in Eliza's eyes at his thoughtfulness. Margaret Grace James, she amended. Grace for your mother. Perfect, Lucas agreed, his voice rough with emotion as he leaned down to kiss first Eliza's forehead, then their daughter's. Welcome to the world, Maggie, later after Mrs. Wilson had departed with promises to return the next day to check on mother and child. The new family of 3 settled into peaceful contentment. Maggie nursed hungrily before falling asleep in Eliza's arms, her tiny features relaxed in perfect trust. I never knew it was possible to love someone I just met so completely, Lucas marveled, watching their daughter sleep, but I already feel I would move mountains for her. That's parenthood, Eliza replied with a tired smile. Instant, overwhelming love. Lucas carefully took Maggie from Eliza's arms and placed her in the cradle he had crafted with such care. Then he stretched out beside his wife, gathering her gently against him. Rest now, my brave girl. You've done the most amazing thing today." As Eliza drifted towards sleep, secure in her husband's embrace and with their daughter sleeping peacefully beside them, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect happiness. From the day Lucas had ridden onto her family's land and saved her grandmother's dowry chest, to this night when he had helped her bring their child into the world, he had been her partner, her champion, her love. "What are you thinking?" Lucas murmured, noticing her thoughtful expression. "I was thinking about what you said that first day," she replied softly, "about my dowry being my smile, my spirit, my heart." "I meant every word," he assured her. "I know," she said, reaching up to touch his beloved face. "And now I understand completely what my mother meant in her letter. My true dowry wasn't the chest or anything in it. It was the capacity to love and be loved. That's the real legacy she left me." Lucas kissed her softly. "And what a magnificent legacy it is, my love. One we'll pass on to our Maggie and any other children we might be blessed with." "I love you, Lucas James," Eliza whispered as sleep began to claim her. "More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "And I love you, Eliza James," he replied, his arms tightening slightly around her, "for all of my days and beyond." In the years that followed, the James family flourished. Maggie grew into a spirited, intelligent girl with her father's calm confidence and her mother's kind heart. She was joined by a brother, Harold Lucas, 2 years later, and a sister, Emma Rose, 2 years after that. The ranch prospered under Lucas and Eliza's dedicated care, gradually expanding as they acquired neighboring land and increased their livestock. What had begun as a modest homestead became a respected operation known for its well-bred horses and principled business practices. The dowry chest remained a cherished piece of their family history, its contents evolving over time. Each child added their own treasures: Maggie's first drawing, Harold's collection of interesting stones, Emma's pressed wildflowers. On quiet evenings, Eliza would sometimes open it with the children gathered around, sharing stories of her mother and grandmother, ensuring their legacy lived on in a new generation. And on their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their expanded home watching their children play in the yard, Lucas presented Eliza with a small wooden box, exquisitely carved by his now expert hands. Inside lay a gold locket similar to the one Eliza had inherited from her mother, but this one contained tiny portraits of their 3 children. "To add to your dowry," Lucas explained as he fastened it around her neck. "Though your greatest gift to me has always been your love." Eliza leaned against her husband, her heart full as she watched their children living embodiments of the love they shared. Who would have thought that a desperate moment over a dowry chest would lead to all this happiness? Lucas chuckled, his arm warm around her shoulders. "I knew the moment I saw you that day, standing up to your father and that merchant, that you were special. I just didn't know then that you would become my entire world. And you became mine," Eliza replied, turning to kiss him softly. "My love, my partner, my home." As the desert sun set on another day of their shared life, casting long shadows across the land they had nurtured together, Eliza reflected that some treasures couldn't be contained in chests or counted in dollars. The true wealth in life, she had learned, lay in loving hearts, in promises kept, in family bonds that strengthened with each passing year. And it had all begun because a cowboy had recognized that her true dowry was her smile.